today. So that is right. My birthday was on a Saturday. I truly wasn't sure. But now I know. It was a Saturday. So it was definitely Friday, the 27th of April, 2018. That's when Steamboat Geyser went off. For the third time in the current active phase. Which means it's gone off a lot of times since then, because it's now up to number 48. And that's what this is about. This prophecy is about eruption number 48. But it's also about eruption number 16. Because it's the 16th eruption of 2019. 16 in 19. Number 16 in 19. Turn 6 on its head and you get 9. Interesting. Interesting how I've been saying the wrong thing about Jake turning 7 after Nathan's birthday. Because of course he wasn't 7, he was 17. But 17 and 7 is 24. That makes no difference. I mean, 17, I was saying 7 plus 17 is 24. Well, 17 plus 7 is 24. So it's the same. 17 plus 7. So Jake would have turned 17 85 days after Nathan was born. Saturday. Nathan died on a Saturday. My birthday was on a Saturday this year. We just worked that out, painfully. And we got there though. I like to be accurate when I say stuff in videos, but sometimes I'm not, because I get a bit confused. It happens, you know. Check that out. So after the firestorm, after all the flames and the, you know, destruction, the burning, then you get the regrowth, the regeneration, the phoenix rising from the ashes. So Nathan and Crystal, very close, siblings, very close. Angels. Jake and Nathan are angels. Crystal, Nathan's sister. Jake's got a sister named Amy. There was a period there where I was saying that Nathan's sister was Amy, because that's the name of Jake's sister. I just mixed them up. That's what I mean. Sometimes I just get confused. I make mistakes like that. So if there's videos of, I don't know how far back they are, quite a long way back. But there are videos where I said Nathan and Amy instead of Nathan and Crystal. It's Jake and Amy. Jake's older sister is Amy. And she lives in Minneapolis. Minneapolis is one of the twin cities of Minnesota. And there are so many strange things, so many strange connections. I talked about Manic Monday. And Manic Monday, of course, is a song by Prince. Well, it's by the Bangles, but it's written by Prince, the singer. Prince. He wrote that song. And he's from Minneapolis. He died in 2016. The same year Jake's remains were found. Well, Jake's killer, Daniel Heinrich, led the FBI and police to Jake's remains in 2016 after DNA connected him. DNA evidence connected him to another victim who was not murdered. He survived. He was 13. 12? Might have been 12. His name was Jared. So that's how Jake's case was solved. But for 27 years, no one knew what happened to Jake. It was a mystery. I found out who Jake was back in 2010, the start of 2010. I went to Sydney. I went to Vaucluse in Sydney. I met face to face the aquarium man. I don't expect anyone to believe that, but I did. And then I came back from Sydney And a couple of days later, it was definitely Wikipedia. I had been searching for a boy named Jake. I knew somewhere out there was a boy named Jake. I had known that since 2006, 2007. I first went to Vaucluse in Sydney in 2008, and I was reading The Dark Tower by Stephen King at the time. I had invented a name, I had made up a name, Jake Towers. Jake Towers, a 12-year-old prankster. This was years before I found out who Jake Wethling was. And it was before Nathan Breeze died in the Black Saturday bushfires. Nathan was still alive back then. He would have been 9. So back when I was working it out, back when I came up with the name, how old was Nathan at the start of 2007? He would have been 9. That's when I invented the name Jake Towers, a 12-year-old prankster. I've read that Nathan was a prankster. He liked playing pranks. And so did Jake. They both were big fans of April Fool's Day. Both of them. Pranksters. Fun-loving boys. Kinds of boys who walk into the room and they bring laughter, smiles, good energy. Good energy. Why do bad things happen to good people? That was a question. A question came up when I was seeing the counsellor. I saw a counsellor for quite a while. He was good. Very good, actually. Brilliant. Helpful as hell. I mean, helpful as heaven and hell combined. Because Carl Jung says something interesting, and that is, for a tree to reach all the way up to heaven, you know, for its little flowers, even gum trees have flowers, for its little flowers to reach all the way up to heaven, its roots have to go all the way down to hell. Yeah, that was Carl Jung, a Swiss psychoanalyst, psychologist. He trained in psychiatry, and then he turned to psychology. I mentioned his name to some psychiatrists once, and they didn't seem to like me saying that name, Carl Jung. He went through a psychosis where he was talking to people who weren't there. Voices, visions, the whole works. He didn't take medication. He chose to just go through it. He recorded a lot of stuff during that period. You know, while he was out pottering around in the garden talking to his imaginary friends. He recorded and wrote and drew some of his most interesting stuff. And some of his most interesting theories came from that. And when he was counselling people, he wasn't counselling people like, you know, the psychiatrists who reckoned they treated me. They didn't treat me. They lectured me. They lectured me. And they forcibly medicated me. And they virtually replicated what happened to me when I was 13. Someone having total power over me. Total power and authority over me. First the aquarium man, and then, you know, the first person you tell after something terrible happens to you, especially sexual abuse kind of stuff, but it can be any kind of abuse. Abuse where someone has total power over you, it feels the same no matter whether it's sexual or physical or just purely mental and emotional. It feels the same either way. So when they said they were going to give me a few minutes to think about it, and in other words, in a few minutes I had to say yes, or else they were going to forcibly medicate me against my free will. Well, it was back to the abuse, really. My counsellor was horrified, absolutely horrified by what happened to me. So for all this talk, the government talks about putting more money into mental health. Well, if the money is being spent in the way it was spent on me, it's not going to help anybody. Some people are helped by medication. I was helped by medication. Antidepressants did help me the first time. They helped me. They also harmed me because I shared things I shouldn't have shared publicly. I became very calm, so that's good in one way. But then I was like not worried about anything, and I became deluded into thinking that everyone is trustworthy and nice. You know, I was unlucky. I just came across a bad guy in the park when I was 13. Now I'm fine. I'm safe. I'm away from that, and well, you know, it took a while to get to that, to thinking I was safe. But I did go through a period thinking, I'm okay now, I'm in a safe place. And then you realize you're not. Not at all. There's a lot of deceptive people in the world. And there's a lot of people who like having power over other people. It's not rare. I quit my job last year. I was working in after school care. But the coordinators just made it so uncomfortable and so horrible to go to work. And I drove home from work so many times feeling depressed and feeling, especially from one of my jobs where the coordinator really did picked on me, treated me bad compared to other staff, made me feel he humiliated me several times in front of the whole group. And it was like, he held a grudge. He didn't let it go. And if I stood up to him at all, he'd punish me. Put me on washing up duties, kitchen duties. He held a grudge. He didn't like me. Obviously he didn't like me. He always found reasons to criticize me. He said, it's not your job to be a friend with the kids. Not your job to be their friend. And I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? Stand on the boundary with a radio and what? Do you want me to wear a vest and a border security cap and, you know, supervise? Is that what you think my job is? Because I'm pretty sure when I did my interview, it said we want you to interact with the kids, get involved with the kids, play games with the kids. That's what we want you to do. But then on the job, because the boss doesn't like me, he's saying it's not your job to be a friend to the kids. It's not your job to be their friend. You got to boss them around. You got to tell them who's boss. You got to show them who's boss, or they'll walk all over us. It was bad enough that one of the kids made an observation one day. A boy in year 6 who was a school leader came up to me after afternoon tea, because the boss had really singled me out and this kid that was talking to me, and really blew up, really went off, because he was about to try and get the attention of the group, and this kid was talking to me. He yelled out my name really loud, really angry. And the kid was startled, and I was like, by then I was like, no longer inclined to be humiliated by him. I just shrugged my shoulders and I played the part of the nonchalant teenager. And I kind of smirked. Because by then I had made up my mind, I'm not staying here any longer. Not putting up with your crap anymore. And the year 5 boys nearby were shaking their heads and going, Phil, you're so bad. And I'm like, yeah, I know I am. And I said it loud enough. I said, yeah, I know I'm bad. I said it loud enough for the boss to hear. And I knew he would not like it. He pretended not to hear, but I knew he heard. Well, that was towards the end of my time, because one of the kids came up to me after that and he said, do you and, I mean, I won't use his real name, but let's just go with, let's pretend his name was Wallace. Do you and Wallace get along? Like my coordinator. Do you get along? And I was like, I could have just done what, you know, professional adults are meant to do. If a child asks a question that's not a child question, you can just say, hey, that's none of your business. But is that respecting a child? To say that's none of your business? Go away. That's what a lot of adults do. I've seen them, I've heard them. It's none of your business, go away. There's no respect in that. That's just being condescending and rude, which they say you shouldn't be condescending or rude, but then they are. Exactly that to the children. I find that baffling, but I don't. See, we say to kids, I meant to say to kids, like if I go back to work now, I meant to say to the kids, hey, you should be honest. You should be honest, you should always tell the truth. Well, if I was back at after school care now, I would probably say to the kids, because I know it's pointless trying to work in any job these days, because the bosses are all the same. They are all the same. I mean, let's face it, I got banned from going somewhere as a customer because I dared to ask some personal questions of the staff. That intense personal interest is just not acceptable. It's totally inappropriate. Really? Why? Because what? You think what? What do you think? You two-faced piece of bossiness. Two-faced piece of bossiness. The kid goes, do you and Wallace get along? I said, well, we don't exactly see eye to eye. But, you know, I said, you get that in life. It doesn't mean we don't like each other. So I gave not an honest answer, but a diplomatic answer. You know, that's what you're meant to be, right? Diplomatic. You're meant to just, you know, if you choose not to be rude and arrogant, like, it's none of your business, go away. That's what a coordinator would generally say. It's none of your business, go away. You know, and just no consideration that the child is an equal at all. You're a kid. Don't forget you're a kid. Don't ask that, go away. That's the typical coordinator response. I tried to be diplomatic, and the kid is staring at me. Because he's a smart boy, he's observant. And he goes, are you sure? Because it seems to me like he absolutely hates you. I'd been working with this kid since he was in kindergarten, looking after him every afternoon for some of those years, and then I was looking after him less often towards the end, one afternoon a week in the end. He knew me very well. He'd seen the way I was being treated at work by my boss, and after all those years and seeing all what he'd seen and what he saw that day, that was his observation, and it was true. But you know, I'd actually started to accept that I was paranoid, that I was too sensitive. You know, all the crap that people said to me. Oh, you're too sensitive. Oh, you're paranoid. You think too much. It's like you're just too sensitive. You think people are having a go at you when they're not. Garbage. The kid was right. He was spot on. He was spot on. He was dead right. And that's not something... I did tell that, actually. I told that to the boss of the whole company. And the response was to just take me away from that program. So if a coordinator is being a real arrogant, nasty piece of work, and the employee complains, well, the answer is to simply remove the employee from the program. So that's where honesty gets you. If a kid was to ask me, you know, or if I was to be talking to a group of kids and, you know, about honesty, why you should always be honest. I mean, that's what adults are meant to say, right? To kids. Oh, you should always be honesty. Honesty is the best policy. You shouldn't lie. You shouldn't deceive. No, I wouldn't be saying that to the kids. No way would I say that to the kids, because that is the ultimate deception to say that to kids. It's not true. Honesty is not the best policy. When I came out about being gay, I got ghosted, shunned, I got snubbed by so many people in so many ways that I came very close to ending my life. That's why I said my counsellor was brilliant. And he helped save my life, despite all the cruelty of a lot of people. He helped me see a bit of hope in all that darkness. Darkness that came not from what happened to me when I was 13, not at all, but from being an outsider, which is the connection I felt with the boy when I met him. I thought, he's different. He's not like the other people here. He's different. And I thought maybe he's gay. That was the thought I had at the time. But when I saw him again, I was like, no, I don't think he's gay. Not that I got the best gaydar in the world, but I thought, no, I don't think he's gay. And then he told me he's Muslim. And I knew then he's not gay. Or if he was, even if he was never going to say it. Because he was Muslim and he was a believer, faithful to his faith. And faith, religious people who are strongly faithful, well, being gay is generally regarded as not compatible with being a good Muslim or a good Christian or a good Jew or a good Hindu or a good Buddhist. To be gay is like seen as being, you know, like my boss at my job. He said, this is not something, because I decided eventually to tell an adult at my work that I'm gay, because I had actually told two of the boys. One of the boys said I would make a great dad, and I said, you think so? And I was really pleased to hear this, and from a year 6 boy, and he's like, yeah, you would. And I was like, would you still feel that way if I told you I was gay? And he was very surprised. But he was like, and he said to me, people think that's bad, don't they? And I said, well, yeah, they do. People do think it's bad. And I said, but I think they're wrong. I think it's bad to hide it. It's bad when people are forced to live in secrecy, whether they're gay or Muslim. It's bad to be forced to live in secrecy and shame and guilt, stigma, fear, isolation. All of that can lead to bad things happening. I didn't say all this to him, but that's what I think. I just said, yeah, people do think it's bad, but I don't think it's bad. And he said, I don't care. I still think you'd make a great dad. And I was like, wow. That was really special. He was not the type of boy I would have ever imagined saying that to me at all. Because he was actually one of the cool kids. Loving. Naughty. He was naughty, but loving. And I think that is something that is also true of Jake and Nathan. Mischievous, pranksters, naughty, loving at the same time. So a prophecy for Steamboat Geezer. Why? Because Steamboat Geezer obviously symbolizes something. Beyond just being this thing that throws water in the air and makes steam. That is actually symbolic of something. And Jake and Nathan are kind of saying, hey, there's actually a lot more potential, you know, with spirituality than just being faithful to a religion. Like a sheep. You don't have to be a sheep. You can be faithful in whatever way you choose. And you can pick and choose what you want to pick and choose from the Bible to believe, because there's some really dark and messed up stuff in there. And if you go with that dark stuff, then that's a personal choice. But you can choose to go with what's dark, or you can choose to go with what's light. That's Jake and Nathan's message. And, you know, everyone's got darkness in them. Everyone has darkness. And you can choose to either repress it. But Carl Jung says if you repress it repress the darkness, it just grows darker. You know? Repress the dark, it just grows darker. And darker. And darker. And darker. The shadow gets darker. If you repress it and ignore it and pretend it's not there, it gets darker. Blacker. That boy's black as the ace of spades. Nathan's description of how he looked physically after the firestorm. Not a racist comment. And not a comment on morality. A bit of a joke. Nathan did not lose his sense of humour. People seem to have this expectation in religious circles that if you've been punished in such an extreme way as to die in a firestorm, well, that will teach you a lesson and you won't be making jokes anymore. Well, Nathan lives in defiance of that. He's not in this world anymore. He has not lost his sense of humour. He still cracks jokes, the same as he always did. Yeah, he went through horror. So did his sister. His little sister went through it. Nathan wasn't even thinking about himself as he died. He was thinking of the other people who were with him. His thoughts were on them, not on himself. Crystal, the same, because they're very similar people. Jake was in a different situation. He was alone with a stranger, alone with a predator, who took him to a remote place in the dark, sexually molested him, and then didn't know what to do with him. Didn't want to kill him, just didn't know what to do with him. And then when a police car came past, he got spooked and he decided, I can't take any more risks, I'm just going to have to kill this kid. And he did. And so Jake's life ended, totally unnecessarily, because this guy was trapped in the dark. In 1989, being gay was not acceptable in the United States, any more than it was in Australia or England or anywhere else. It just was not socially acceptable. There were people that were out, yeah, there were brave people who were out in 1989. There were the Freddie Mercurys of the world. Freddie Mercury didn't have long to live in 1989. He actually died on Nathan's birthday in 1991. I mean, Nathan hadn't been born yet, but Freddie Mercury died on the 24th of November, 1991. 4 years later, Nathan Breeze was born. 4 years exactly after Freddie Mercury died. Freddie Mercury, Queen, one of the first artists who I connected to Nathan. Aha, the Norwegian band, Aha, I connected them early on. I realised that Nathan was pretty fond of the song My Baby. Is it My Baby? My Baby is a Centerfold. Yeah. I realised Nathan liked that song and Maneater. It was Maneater that made me realise Nathan was mostly straight. Mostly straight. But he wasn't entirely straight. Nathan was bisexual. And so is Jake. Both are bisexual. And Jake's on the gay, let's say that's the gay end of town and that's the straight end of town. Well, Nathan's about there and Jake's about there. 69% at a guess. Gay or straight, which is kind of like bisexual. Nathan, basically into girls. But if you met the right guy, like Jake, he could swing that way. Easily. Jake's the same. Basically into guys. But if you met the right girl, he could swing that way. Easily. No problem. Yeah. So that's just something I sensed about Jake and Nathan. It took me a while to figure it out, but it was Maneater, the song Maneater. And then I'm on my way to the library, so I hear Maneater, and an hour later, I'm reading all these little, I'm reading what do you call it at a funeral? The eulogy. I read what Nathan's dad had said about him, or written about him. Actually, it was something he wrote and posted online. And it confirmed that Nathan was straight, or it confirmed that he was into girls, because he mentioned that Nathan had worked his butt off through the school holidays to save up enough money to take his girlfriend to the movies. So that was just before he died. Literally in the weeks leading up to his death. School holidays. I mean, it was just back to school, right? 7th of February 2009, back to school time. I mean, imagine if Nathan had been one of the kids that I looked after and cared for, and that had happened, and I'd known him, I would have been devastated. The kids that I worked with meant everything to me, and for me to leave my job before the end of the year meant that there had to be something horribly wrong. And there was. It was the coordinator. That's what was horribly wrong. I didn't see the year through. I started with this group of kids when they were at the start of kindy, and I left in October last year. I would have loved to have seen them through to the end of year 6, but I couldn't hack it anymore. I could not do it any longer. I could not tolerate that coordinator anymore. I couldn't handle it anymore. I couldn't do it anymore. I missed their end of year dinner, and then I stopped working. I didn't say I quit, I just said I can't come back to work. I didn't say the truth, because I'd worked out by then that telling the truth was a waste of time. And it is. Telling the truth in this world doesn't actually get you anywhere. And if I was to say to the kids, hey, honesty, what is the go with honesty? Should you always be honest? I'd be like, well, definitely not. And it's not just to avoid hurting someone's feelings. You shouldn't not be honest always, because you don't want to be like brutally honest and hurt someone's feelings. You don't want to say like, yeah, like, oh, you've got like, I mean, I've had plenty of people say nasty stuff to me. And, you know, it's not because they're keen on being honest, it's just because they're keen on being nasty, sadistic bastards, really. And sometimes people will say, I'm just honest. I'm just being honest, mate. And as if that's, you know, an explanation for being really nasty and cruel, which it's not. And everyone knows you don't go up to someone and say, oh, geez, you're fat. Geez, you're the fattest guy I've ever seen. Or geez, you're short. Or geez, you're whatever, ugly. You know, nobody does that. Everyone knows that's wrong. That's not being honest. That's just being a bastard. Everyone knows that. So that doesn't even need to be said. It doesn't even need to be put into words. Everyone knows that. But what I would say to the kids is, no, you should not be honest. Because if you are honest, you'll end up like Julian Assange. In jail. Forever. Because this is not an honest world. It's a world full of deceivers and people who are two-faced. Hypocrites, liars, deceivers, people who like to rip people off in very underhanded... You know, you really think the government cares to protect people from scammers? Do you really think they care? Because they don't. If they cared, a lot of these scammers that ring up every, you know, the phone calls that people get, that we get, from people saying they're Telstra, from people saying they're Foxtel, from people when they're not. People saying, you know, oh, your computer's not working. People saying, and all these people selling tickets online to concerts at 5 times the value of a ticket. Do you really think the government cares? They don't care. If they cared, they would crack down on it big time. They would have task forces that go after these rip-off merchants and take them down. There's no resources put into it. If you go to the cops about someone who's actually ripping people off, stealing big sums of money, using any of these common tactics, they'll just say, well, what do you want us to do about it? So the world is not honest. It's not honest at all. It's all about fear, controlling people through fear and deception. That's what it's about. And, you know, I've had kids of every nationality that I've looked after, including a few Chinese kids. And I've got no problem with saying, I do not like the Chinese government. I do not like the government of China. I don't like the way they operate. I don't like the way they obviously enjoy having total power over their people. I've got no problem saying that. I'd say the same thing about a lot of other countries too. But China does seem to be a standout in terms of abusing human rights. But that doesn't mean that when I go to work and there's a Chinese kid there, that I treat him any different to the other kids. In fact, one of the Chinese kids at work was closer to me than most of the kids at my work. So there is not a drop of racism in me. The only country I really have an issue with the government of, that is a powerful nation, is China. Then you've got all the little dictatorships and little homophobic, you know, cowards like, what's the one in Asia that just changed their mind because people stood up to them when they decided to bring back the death penalty for homosexuality, and a few actors and, you know, high profile entertainers said, well, let's boycott them. Let's not go to their motels and hotels. And then they backpedaled and said, oh, we're not going to enforce it. I don't want to name the country because I'm not quite sure. I'm pretty sure it starts with a B. There's heaps of those around. That's common. You know, you get these little dictators, religious or otherwise, and they just decide to impose their moral code of ethics on everyone else. They're the moral police, you know. Facebook's not much better. You know, the whole idea that nudity is threatening to people, and not just offensive, but, you know, hurtful and threatening and dangerous and harmful and abusive and all this stuff. All the words that Facebook attached to nudity. It's garbage. On Facebook, you can control what you see. You can control whose posts you see. You can control who you are friends with. So if you don't like what someone's posting, you don't have to delete them, unfriend them. You can just say, I don't want to see their posts anymore. End of problem. So there's that. And then there's the fact that Facebook can, if a photo is deemed to be like against their community standards, well, if that's the case, if it's against their community standards, in other words, if it's against Mark Zuckerberg's personal moral, you know, standing, keeping in mind that he's from a religious background, if it's against his personal moral outlook on life, against the community standards, well, the photo can't be seen anyway. It can only be seen by you. They do that now. It's like, oh, this photo is deemed against our community standards, so only you can see this photo, no one else can see it. Okay, so that should be the end of it, right? You can post as many inappropriate photos as you want because no one's going to see them anyway. But no, that's not how it works. If you post another image that's against the community standards, I did this little experiment. I just wanted to see, because I know it used to be I got kicked off Facebook because I was pushing the boundaries of what's acceptable. And I wasn't posting photos of nudity. I was posting plenty of photos of teenagers wearing shorts on the beach and whatnot, and I was kind of amused that a 16-year-old boy wearing Speedos was deemed nudity. Or 17 for that matter. You know, he could literally be days away from being 18. And if that is recorded, the fact that he's not yet 18, not legal, not of legal age yet, well, being in shorts might be enough to be deemed as against the community standards. It's got nothing to do with nudity. It's got everything to do with age and this crazy idea that people under the age of 18 aren't allowed to show any bare skin, because somehow that is exploitation of children. It just shows how shallow and pathetic our society is in many respects, including Facebook, especially Facebook. Facebook is demonizing sexuality, especially in relation to youth, in exactly the same way that the Bible, the Quran, all these holy books through history have demonized human sexuality. Satan's the devil. If you're gay or if you're homosexual, it's an abomination to the Lord. And if you don't repent, you're going to burn for all eternity. Homosexuals are always included on the list. What I noticed about the footballer, his post, which was defended by liberal, conservative, even gay, married politicians on the liberal side of the fence, defended the footballer's post as free speech. Now, I've seen hundreds of these posts on Facebook back when I was on there, before I got kicked off, which is why I was pushing the boundary, because there was people I knew, Christians, conservatives, who had a hatred for Muslims and a hatred for gays, which they didn't admit, but it was obvious from what they posted. It was so clear, so obvious. And homosexuals are always on that list of people who will burn, and sometimes they're mixed in, thrown in with pedophiles and adulterers. Adulterers was on the list, the footballers list. Adulterers, but you know who wasn't on the list? Do you know what category of person was not included on the footballers list? I mean, he just retweeted this thing. He just reposted this thing on Instagram. But do you know who was not on the list? Murderers. Murderers were not on the list. That's what I noticed. That's what stood out. Murderers, no mention. Serial killers, they weren't on the list either. Atheists were on there. Atheists were on the list, and atheists are often, and gay people are often assumed to be atheists. It's assumed that if you're gay, you're an atheist, because you're obviously not religious if you're gay. It's a bit like when I met the young Muslim man, he's taller than me by a few inches, and I could have easily, when he said, I'm Muslim, I could have easily walked away from him then and gone, well, I don't want to talk to you. But I didn't. I actually came back. I went back to my car. I was polite to him and I said, listen, probably not you, but who knows. And then I went back to my car. It came to me that maybe, because he told me he's half Asian, not Latino, but half Asian. So it came to me that maybe he's half Indonesian. And that would fit with the prophecy about Mount Papandayan, which I think is going to go off in 2020. 2020 is the reflection of 2002. And that makes sense for all kinds of reasons, which I'm not going to go into. But a red hat equals 666. A boy from Indonesia said that to me. A red hat equals 666. A boy from Indonesia. That's what he said. A red hat equals 666. A red hat equals 666. Why did he say that? Because I said, do you know what a red hat means? He was wearing a red cap and I thought it suited him. He was 8 years old, this boy. He's from Indonesia, he's from West Java. Papandayan, the volcano, is in West Java, Indonesia. West Java, Indonesia. I said, do you know what a red hat means? And he looks at me and goes, yeah, a red hat means 666. And it was so weird because I had actually been working on something to do with a volcano in Indonesia, but not West Java, Bali. A volcano had been erupting. A volcano by the name of Mount Agung had been going off, erupting. Yeah, I'll be back in a sec. I'll sit this here, you might happen to see something interesting while I'm gone. If it happens, tell me. Mount Agung, Bali. Mount Agung, Bali, Indonesia. Mount Agung, Bali. Anything happen? Probably not. Mount Agung, Bali,